the show.
Welcome to episode 2 of Similar Amplitudes, aka Blaine and Chris Talk About Music, aka that other name that we came up with last time, but can't really remember. So, once again, Blaine and Chris Talk About Music. I'm Blaine.
I'm Chris.
Yeah, that's right. Hence the name, So, we've got a very interesting episode for you today. We're going to be talking about pipe organs. That's why we have our lovely pipe organ here displayed in the background. We're going to be talking about some sort of interesting uses for pipe organs, why they're important even in today's church world especially. And so I've got some interesting things to bring up. Chris, did you have experience growing up with hearing organs, in your church and things like that?
I did. It was an interesting experience. I'd never heard an organ before, and then the first time it was, where is all this sound coming from?
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. It is. It's an amazing experience. And growing up in the church I grew up in, shout out to First United Methodist Church in Kosciuszko. And growing up in that church, we heard the organ every week, and we still do hear the organ every week. In fact, it's the same organist there that was there when I was growing up. And it was just I was always enamored with just how amazing that instrument was. And so, it is still a big part of churches today, although I do feel like maybe not as much so as it once was, and I think that's for a few different reasons. I think there aren't as many people learning how to play the organ anymore, and it's kind of a chicken and egg scenario. It's sort of like because of that, there were also fewer colleges teaching organ. It's sort of like which one kind of begat the other. It's sort of hard to say what's causing what, but for sort of a few different reasons, you don't see as much use of the organ in church nowadays, but I feel like I still feel like it's the absolute best instrument for congregational singing. That's always been my experience, and I think it's just because the organ is a special instrument because, especially in a congregational singing standpoint, it holds the notes out for as long as you want them to be held out, as opposed to a piano where you strike it and it immediately starts to get quieter, or a guitar which isn't even going to usually cover your vocal parts. But the organ is playing your vocal parts, and it holds them out for a long time, just like the human voice does. And so I really think for that reason it's a really important thing. Other instruments can work for congregational singing, but I always have thought that the organ was the best one for it. And I think it's just a really important instrument in the church world. It was then, it is today, Chris did some interesting research for kind of what we were talking about today. He was telling me about some things this morning, even some things that I didn't know about. So I'd be kind of interested to hear some stuff you were researching.
Yeah, so I found one article that just talked about the history of the organ and how it existed 1,100 years before it was even put into a church setting.
Right.
So recreational, ceremonial, that sort of usage there.
Yeah.
I guess it could still be ceremonial,
right,
in a sense.
Yeah, that's amazing to think about. It's amazing to think about, how long the organ would have been used in society even before. Nowadays, when people think about an organ, they don't think about its use anywhere other than churches. It's like organ and church. It's like those two things are synonymous. It's interesting to think how long people were using them in other respects before that, and the technology behind what it takes to make an organ happen is just phenomenal. To think how long that technology has existed is just an incredible. Even with like what is considered to be like modern organ technology has existed, like modern mechanical organ technologies has existed for hundreds of years, and that's just an incredible thing. I mean, the mechanical elements of an organ that Bach would have played are not terribly different from the mechanical elements of an organ now. The one big change being that back then to get air through the organ, you literally had to have like a dude back there doing this. Now there's electronic blowers that send the air through the pipes. That's the one big difference. But most mechanical elements of organs are roughly the same and have been for 300 plus years, and it's incredible. So, I thought that was a really interesting thing that you shared, and I know you would had come across some other stuff too. I think maybe that you had said.
Yeah, like Henry VIII not only is synonymous for his many wives, but he
Yeah.
lesser known his organ collection.
His many organs also, yes.
Like it was ranging from like the very rudimentary, like this is a pipe with air that is blown through it over a divot
Right.
inside, making that tone, to more quote advanced
Right.
style of
Right.
organ.
He collected wives and he collected organs. It's really fascinating. And I mean, organs they were synonymous with just daily life, especially back then. I mean, they were everywhere. They were in homes, they were in churches, and even now, if for those of you that live in the Asheville area that have, or maybe you don't, but have been to the Biltmore Estate, there's an organ there in the large formal dining hall that was built by the Aeolian Skinner Company, which is still a really well-known organ builder. It's large homes had organs, and churches and performance halls, and they were just everywhere. Our director here is holding up a note for me, and she brought up a really, really good point actually in this note that she held up for me, that another place where you see them all the time is baseball parks. And I'm a huge baseball fanatic, and baseball parks, about half, I've researched this before, about half of the Major League Baseball teams still have live ballpark organists, which is a really interesting thing. Yeah, about like 15 or 16 of the 30 teams still have live organists that play, they do. And, usually of course, electronic organs, but very nice electronic organs. And some don't have a live organist anymore, or they never did. Some, especially if it's a newer ballpark, sometimes they were installed without an organ. And so they just use recordings of organ music. And that's another place too, where it's just synonymous with baseball, and so, it's interesting to think that there's still that many teams that use live organists. It's really fascinating. It's we don't think about the places where we still hear organs all the time. We go to a baseball game and don't even think about it. It's going ba bum ba bum ba bum ba ba da 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 da, but we're not really thinking about it. It's just like, oh, this is a sound you hear at baseball games. But it's most of the time, especially in a professional situation, there's somebody behind that console playing that every time you hear it, and so that's just a really cool thing. But is there any other like interesting things maybe that you found out in you're just sort of looking things up and researching?
There was a lot.
Mozart,
rightfully so, said it was the king of the instruments.
Right, that's right.
And it's just thinking about the amount of upkeep, the amount of effort to put into this instrument, the amount of space it takes up.
Yes.
Like, I can just fit my saxophone in my car, but like you can't. All right, we're gonna go play a gig. Let's pack up the.
Let's pack up the organ. Let's take all the pipes. Let's move the console. Yeah, you can't put that in your car.
Like, retune everything, and I guess now like the next step in developing this instrument is like electronic.
Right.
Even like half of this is electronic.
Right.
MIDI, like Carnegie Hall, their organ's MIDI.
Yep, that's right. And with modern technology, I mean, modern electronic organs can sound so similar to a pipe organ. A lot of times you can't even tell. Yeah. The one thing you're missing is you don't have the actual air sound, but they can even mimic that. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's incredible how authentic a modern electronic organ can sound. Because for those of you that don't know much about our organ, for years, our Rogers organ that we have here in our sanctuary was electronic only when it was in the old sanctuary, and then we added the pipes just when we moved in here a little over 2 years ago, and so it's really it's a nice hybrid. Like I said, the Rogers Organ Company manufactured the electronic elements of the organ, and they built the console and everything. But then Phil Parkey from Atlanta added our pipes in, and so he and his crew did a great job with the pipe design to make it look aesthetic in our space, I think. And the other thing too I want to talk about is we kind of circle back around to the organ as a means for congregational singing. I talked about the reason why it works so well is because you can just hold a note out for as long as you want to, because when you activate a key, the air is going to push through that pipe for as long as the space is open for it to, until you let off the key, that's when the sound will stop. And so because of that, some composers have been able to do some interesting things with the organ. And one of the most interesting is a piece by the composer John Cage. John Cage was an American composer. He died in, I think, around 1990, late 80s, early 90s. And he was very well known for very experimental music and really pushing the boundaries of what it meant, of what sound could be, and of what music is and what performance art is. He is most famous for his piece 433, which is 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence. That's probably the piece that he's most well known for at first glance or listen, I guess. People say, well, that's stupid. That's not music. It's just silence. And to an extent, it might not be true music, but the whole point of that piece was that every performance of that piece would be different because the ambient sounds in the space change every time depending on where you are and who's in there and things like that. And so the music is what you hear around you in the silence. So it's, interesting things like that. But another piece that John Cage wrote is a piece called As Slow as Possible. And when John Cage originally wrote this piece, it was intended to it's an organ piece. And when he wrote this piece, it was intended to take something like 639 years to perform, I think, or something like that, which you're thinking, that's crazy. How could you possibly do that? One person can't sit in an organ for 639 years. So
maybe Jan Kelly.
Jan Kelly might be able to. Jan, if you want to give it a shot. But what they did was there's a performance currently of this piece going on in Germany, in an organ in Germany, and they have weights that they set on the keys. So no one has to actually sit at the console all the time. And so with a weight on the key, that note will continue to ring out as long as you need it to until you take that weight off the key. And so the instructions in the music will say, D and a G, 5 for the particular octave, and it'll say, hold those notes for 2 years. I'm not kidding. Yeah. And then it will say, add in B flat 5 to then have that go on for 2.5 years. And that's how the directions in the music work, and it's a really amazing thing to see.
Yeah, it was built when it was built. It was early 2000s.
Right.
It was a 17-month period of silence.
Right.
Before it even started. So even if they built it, had everything set, there's no way to tell if it actually worked.
Right.
Until they started the piece.
I know. Yeah, because even when the piece technically started, there was nothing actually happening. So you're still like, what's going to happen? And so for now, I have not heard any stories about any terrible malfunctions with the organ. I mean, someone could presumably work on it and fix, if there was a problem, fix it while it was being performed. It wouldn't be an issue.
It was specifically made for this piece.
Right, it was. That organ was built for this piece. So it's an amazing thing, but that is the reason why the organ works so well for congregational singing, because it can permanently hold out notes. It's very different from a piano, and it's much better at supporting congregational singing, I believe, for that reason. Pianos, I have accompanied congregational singing on piano many times, and it's a perfectly adequate option for congregational singing. And so is a guitar. I've done that too. But you have to make sure that people really know the song. If you're going to accompany on guitar, it can be challenging. But with the organ, there's so much comfort level there to learn a new song you've never sung before. So yeah, I just think so if you've never looked up John Cage's As Slow as Possible before, I highly recommend checking out any of his pieces. He also has a piece that's called 19 Sounds Manufactured in a Kitchen. Yep. It's just a bunch of random noises of kitchen appliances and things. There's also a great YouTube video. I'm not sure if you've ever seen this before. There's a video of him performing on this old show that came on in the 50s called I've Got a Secret. And his secret was that he was a composer, and he performed very unique pieces, and he performed a piece live on the show. It's a great old segment, and he's got a bathtub set up, and then like a grand piano and an alarm clock and a toaster and all these things. And he's just walking all over the stage, setting off all these different things at different times. And he like drops something in the water, and then he like does the alarm clock, and then he goes and plays a chord on the piano. And it's really amazing. So you can Google like John Cage, I've Got a Secret, and find it. It's really really fantastic. So check out John Cage's music if you want a very strange, interesting trip.
Yeah.
And we are being told that we have to get ready to wrap up. So did you have anything you wanted to add before we
I was
finish?
just like thinking about John Cage and how he writes and why he writes. Like you think of Vivaldi, like he wrote for his students.
Right.
Beethoven, Bach.
That's right.
Wrote for kings, and it's like they're commissioned to write these musical works. John Cage was, I want to write something that can't be performed the same way twice.
That's exactly
Whether
right.
it's listening to silence, like you can't tell if there's going to be a ambulance drive by.
Right.
You can't tell as slow as possible. This one woman started at 8 a.m. and ended at 11:30 p.m. or something like that.
Right. And did like the whole thing. Yeah.
It won't be performed the same way again.
That's right. That's right.
It's fascinating.
It really is. It's an amazing thing. So yeah, definitely check out John Cage's music. Listen to some organ recordings. Check out some great organ music. There's so much wonderful stuff out there. So Bach, yeah, Bach,
Great guy.
Start
Great
with
guy.
Bach. He's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you all so much for watching and listening to Blaine and Chris talk about music. Similar amplitudes. Have a great day.